네, 본격적으로 연사님의 강연 시작에 앞서서 먼저 이 강연을 준비하게 된 취지와 또 이 강연을 맡아주신 우크라이나 사회운동에 대해서 소개하려고 합니다. 네, 맨 처음에 사회진보연대 사무처장 개회사에서 이 우크라이나 전쟁이라고 하는 것이 올해의 가장 중요한 사건 중 하나라는 이야기가 있었는데요. 근데 사회진보연대는 이것이 단순히 먼 나라의 안타까운 일이거나 그 지역에서의 분쟁이라고 볼 수 있는 것이 아니라 이 러시아의 침공이 저지되지 않으면 세계가 2차 세계대전 이전에 그러한 혼란의 세계로 돌아갈 수 있는, 우리가 살고 있는 이 세계와 직접적으로 결부되어 있는 사건이고, 또한 중국 공산당의 대만 침공에 대한 의지나 한반도 핵 위기를 앞당길 가능성을 가져올 것이라고 보고서 굉장히 엄중하게 대응을 해오고 있었습니다. 그런데 한국을 비롯하여 세계 사회운동은 또한 굉장히 안타까운 모습을 올해 보여주었는데요. 이러한 러시아의 불법적인 침공에 저항하는 우크라이나 민중들에 대해서 일치단결하여서 지지하기보다는 대단히 많은 논쟁이 있었습니다. 그래서 사회진보연대는 이러한 논쟁들을 타개하기 위해서 무엇보다도 현지에서 침공에 맞서 싸우고 있는 우크라이나 활동가들의 목소리를, 그 우크라이나 사회운동가의 직접적인 연대를 강화할 필요가 있다고 느꼈습니다. 그래서 오늘 이 자리를 준비하게 되었고, 이제 강연을 맡은 우크라이나 좌파단체 사회운동에 대한 설명을 드리겠습니다. 네, 사회운동은 2014년 유로마이단 운동을 계기로 결성된 단체인데요. 옆에 보시면은 설명이 있는데 이 부분은 이따 연사님께서 자세하게 설명해 주실 부분이어서 따로 설명하진 않겠습니다. 그래서 사회운동은 민주적 반자본주의, 페미니즘, 생태사회주의를 표방하는 우크라이나 사회운동 단체로서 오늘날 우크라이나에서 가장 활발하게 활동하는 반자본주의 단체로 평가받고 있습니다. 다음 장으로 넘겨주세요. 네, 그래서 하고 계시는 활동들을 보면은 저희 사회진보연대하고도 굉장히 유사하다라고 느꼈는데요. 우리 사회진보연대의 많은 회원들이 건설, 철도, 광산, 그리고 또 보건의료 등등의 노동자들과 많은 연대와 파업 조직화, 노동조합 조직화 등등을 하고 있는 것처럼 그런 활동들을 하고 계시고, 물론 학생운동, 인권운동, 페미니즘 운동 등 다양한 우크라이나의 사회운동과 교류하고 이것의 성장을 지원하고 있습니다. 그리고 이런 노동운동포럼과 같은 그런 교육 행사들도 우크라이나에서 각지에서 진행을 하고 있습니다. 네. 그리고 이러한 사회운동의 역할이 빛을 발하는 것은 지금 이 우크라이나 전쟁이라는 엄중한 위기 속일 텐데요. 오른쪽을 보시면은 이게 침공 7일차, 일주일이 됐던 때에 사회운동에서 낸 성명을 번역해 본 것입니다. 그래서 지금의 이 전쟁은 수많은 평범한 사람들과 어린이들의 죽음, 파괴된 도시와 삶을 낳고 있는데 이것을 극복할 수 있는 것은 오직 민중의 연대와 대중적 저항이기 때문에 우리 사회운동의 활동가들은 한 사람 한 사람이 이것을 극복하고 평화를 가져오기 위해서 모든 힘을 다할 것이라고 이야기를 하고 있습니다. 그래서 이러한 결의에 따라서 굉장히 많은 활동들을 하고 있는데요. 다음 장에서 보시겠습니다. 사실 이 부분들도 전부 다 연사님께서 이따 말씀해 주실 부분들이어가지고 간단히만 소개를 드리면은, 지금 굉장히 많은 민간인들 삶이 파괴되어 있는 상황에서 이러한 국내외의 사회운동 단체들의 후원을 받고 그것으로 그 물자들을 민간인들에게 직접 그 지역들에 가서 전달을 하거나 하는 그런 자원봉사 활동들을 진행하고 있습니다. 또한 이 역시 오늘 많이 나올 주제인데, 이 전쟁 속에서 우리가 가장 먼저 피해를 입는 것은 노동자들이다라는 이야기들을 저도 굉장히 많은 강연과 교육에서 해왔는데요. 우크라이나에서도 침공의 가장 최전선에서 맞서 싸우는 것도 노동자인 반면 또 그 전쟁의 피해를 직접적인 노동권에 대한 침해로 겪고 있는 부분들이 있어서 그러한 것에 맞서는 캠페인들을 세계 좌파 단체들과 연대하여서 국제 캠페인으로 진행하고 있습니다. 다음 장으로 넘겨주세요. 네. 그리고 그 IMF 위기를 겪은 한국으로서는 굉장히 익숙한 주제일 텐데요. 우크라이나에서도 IMF를 비롯한 세계금융기구로부터의 그 외채와 그에 따른 신자유주의적 구조조정 요구들을 계속 겪어왔는데, 이 전쟁을 통해서 막대한 재건 복구 비용이 필요하게 된 지금 상황에서는 이것이 더 현실적인 문제로 다가왔고, 앞으로 전후 우크라이나 사회의 복원에 있어서 이것이 어떤 영향을 미칠 것인지가 굉장히 중요한 쟁점으로 되어 있습니다. 그래서 우크라이나와 연대를 하는 것은 그 우크라이나의 외채를 탕감하는 것이다 라는 그 외채 전액 탕감 요구를 세계 좌파들과의 연대 캠페인으로 진행하고 있습니다. 그리고 또 마지막으로 이렇게 우리 사회진보연대의 노동운동포럼에서 강연을 하기 위해서 열심히 자료를 준비하고 해주신 것처럼 세계 사회운동들이 조금 더 많이 우크라이나의 저항을 지지할 수 있도록 굉장히 적극적인 연대 활동을 펼치고 계십니다. 네, 그럼 저의 소개는 여기까지였고요. 지금부터 연사님을 모시고 이야기를 들어보도록 하겠습니다.
So I'm Vladislav. I'm a member of a left-wing organization Socialny Ruch in Ukraine. We are promoting a vision of anti-capitalist and social Ukraine, where the rights of most of its population will be respected. I am a historian of Central and Eastern Europe, an activist, trade union and social activist, and one of the organizers of Cancel the Debt campaign. And I hope I will read you today an interesting lecture about what's going on in Ukraine on the topics that are usually not mentioned in the mass media or general discussion. So thank you, and we can start with first slide. So now in Ukraine, as you all know, a horrible war is waged. 100,000 of people killed. In occupied territories, you can find torture chambers, concentration camps, and mass graves with civilians killed. At the same time, cities behind the front line, as Kiev or Odessa or Lviv, are struck with rocket strikes nearly every week, targeting civilian infrastructure, energy, and water supplies. In all of this, some of the left decides for some reason that Ukraine is not worth supporting. But in fact, Ukraine now fights an anti-imperialist and national liberational war against one of the strongest military power in the world. It's not the conflict between US and Russia. It's conflict of imperialist interests of Russia against will to live freely and independently of Ukrainians. As one can hear from Russian media, the reasons for war is not NATO expansion, but the ethno-nationalism and imperialist ambitions of Russia. In this situation, it's important to build international solidarity against all imperialism. The situation with war on Ukraine built very strong authoritarian alliance. So the war of Russia in Ukraine built a strong authoritarian alliance of interdependent powers. It's alliance of such states as Iran, North Korea, Myanmar, Nicaragua, Cuba, Venezuela, Syria, and other states that are ruled mostly by authoritarian means and economically and militarily dependent on each other. Russian planes are striking civilians in Syria, and Iranian drones are killing Ukrainians in Ukraine. All of this shows that this struggle is not only about Ukraine, but about fight for democracy. Win of Ukrainian people will strengthen the struggle of other people. For the money that Iran gets from selling drones, they are buying weapons. They are buying weapons to suppress their own people. The same goes for Syria. So win for every fight against authoritarianism helps each other. On the other hand, victory of Russia will strengthen all of far-right and authoritarian regimes in the world, as well as will strengthen far-right politicians such as Le Pen in France, AfD in Germany, or Trump in America. Other authoritarian leaders such as Modi in India also depended on Putin. If Russia will win, the world that based on democracy will be changed for the world that is based on strength and military great powers. if invasion will succeed and Russia will force some concessions from Ukraine, then it will mean that any state can wage the same war and get something from it. It greatly increases possibilities of other international conflicts. In this situation, also militarization will be all-time high. And if now all the world will listen to Russian nuclear blackmail, and if it will succeed, then it will motivate other states to build nuclear weapons, rising instability all over the world. So I call this situation a fight of evil and status quo. I know that progressive forces or left-wing forces are not happy with situations that are in the world right now. But if Ukraine will lose, situation will get worse. And goes against principle of tripartism, a principle that base that regulating working relation should be between state, because between state, worker, and employer, because employer is employee a lot more fragile than employer. Now, worker nearly one-on-one with its employer. Employer can push for overwork or any limitation that were before prohibited by labor codex, including a lot of new possibilities for firing people from the work. In this situation, we have unprecedented unemployment in our country. 14 people are fighting for one working place, so it means that a lot more power are in the employer and labor market is absolutely cheap. Together with inflation and collapsing economy, it puts serious pressure on wages. And instead of helping its most vulnerable and most biggest part of the population, our government gives tax cuts for the businesses and tries to support businesses, not workers. Of course, businesses are also important, but in what our government doing, it's absolutely unbalanced, one-sided support for the people who have money and not for the people who rely on their wages. Together with it, they introduced in Law 5161 zero-hour contracts. Contracts that destroys responsibility of employer to give certain amount of work to the employee. Under this new law, you can be employed but don't have work and paid a lot less compensation. With this law, you can be employed and have less than minimal wage. Practically, because of this, minimal wage is factually abolished and work becomes more precarious. Before this law, when employer cannot provide any work, he gives 70% of wage to the worker, even if there is nothing to do. Now workers will suffer from employers cannot provide the work. So, and next law in the list is 2352, the law that gives possibility for businesses not to pay wages for mobilized. Mobilized people are still getting wages in the military, but now business have one less responsibility of one less social responsibility and doesn't need to provide any additional wages when person mobilized. As mobilization don't depends on the certain person decision, it just makes all the responsibility for other decision on the person that are mobilized. So there are a lot of situations where people who go to the military and lose their jobs and cannot provide enough funds for families. Fortunately, it's still not widespread practice because a lot of working places still have contracts signed before this law. And even in times of war, workers can defend their rights in courts, and trade unions protest all these laws. So to subjugate trade unions, they introduced a law for nationalization of trade union property. The biggest trade union in Ukraine, Federation of Trade Unions of Ukraine, is trade union from the Soviet times. And when Soviet Union collapsed, trade union directly had Soviet Union property that was state property directed to them, their trade union property. So now the government tries to take this property back using this argument that it has very shady legal status. So they press to nationalize trade union property, to subjugate trade unions, to make them passive, because all of this property, it's what makes possible for trade union to run. It's houses, it's centers, it's different buildings that they organize when they meet, and so on. So it's direct attack on trade union to make them more loyal to these neoliberal reforms. At the same time, they want to nationalize, privatize all health resorts that are now trade union property. They say that on the privatized health resorts, 20% of the people should be refugees and internally displaced people. Now, when health resorts are trade union property, 90% of the people, they're refugees and internally displaced people. So to attack trade unions, they're ready to just have 60% of people kicked out and to privatize this for private persons and oligarchs. So all of this are biggest attack on labor rights in Ukraine for its 30 years. And they're using the war when all of the media attention goes to the what's going on the front line, when the most active people in the trade unions are fighting directly on the front lines, they're pushing these laws because they know that trade unions don't have enough power in this situation to protest. But their antisocial policies towards the workers is not the only one. They're also pushing a very strong neoliberal policies in all of other economical spheres. For example, law mentioned here, 3663, it's merging of social security and pension funds. Basically, they merge two of most important social security bodies in Ukraine to cut financing of both. In this situation, sick leave will be cut. Some guarantees for people who are injured in their work will be cut. Will be cuts to some possibilities to get compensation for some traumas at work. So a lot of such basic social security will be cut just just because of this merge. The same goes for pension funds. There will be a pension cuts because of this, and a lot just less social security for elder people because of this decision. At the same time, regulatory bodies that are regulating an economy of Ukraine, just as having inspections, having ecological regulation, they've all been massively cut. Now they merged all the inspections, like labor inspection, ecological inspection, water, rivers, forests, all of this into one big, absolutely ineffective, with small, non-qualified personnel inspection that practically doesn't do anything. So Ukraine massively deregulates its economy. What does it mean? It means that business can engage very easily in non-ecological activities. It means that worker inspections to secure working rights on some plant or factory or enterprise will be very ineffective. And now, in times of war, there are moratorium for labor inspections at all. So you cannot call labor inspection and say that your rights are not followed here, and that your boss doing some illegal actions in terms of labor security. You cannot call an inspection now, unfortunately. At the same time, it all lies with this Thatcherite ideology that everything should be cut for its effectiveness. In fact, it mostly promotes absolute opposite thing, ineffectiveness of all government structures and very weak state, especially in times of war. It's cuts to mostly all state administrative buildings and state plants and state enterprises. That cuts are massive. It's cuts to workers in atomic plants and energy industry that are still in the parts that are still not privatized. It's cuts for all of the administrative buildings that are provide necessary help for example, for refugees. It all done to promote this neoliberal agenda and have very low budget with very low taxes. So next point is tax reform. When the war started, they introduced massive tax cuts for the rich. Now they're trying to promote even more massive tax cuts. In the parliament, there are discussion for tax reform similar that was proposed in Britain for well-known, the shortest prime ministry ever in this country. So Ukraine promotes same reforms that made her be kicked out of office. So it's radical tax reform that practically destroys all taxes except three: corporate tax on 10%, income tax on 10%, and added value tax on 10%. If this reform will pass, it will be impossible to finance everything in this state, because 10% is absolutely unsustainable for any social services, infrastructure, and even for the military. So, but in this, unfortunately, very ideologized market fundamentalist view, they are thinking that it is the right decision to radically make these cuts. So, and with this policy of like free market, no intervention, deregulation, Ukraine doesn't have stable industrial policy. So it's not like South Korea or Japan, where it's strict industrial policy with some planning commissions that are saying what to produce and how to effectively sell it or something like this. Of course, it's also not very good variant, but nothing like this exists in Ukraine. No industrial policies adopted. And in times of war, it means no strong military industrial policy too. So most of the military production are just private contracts from the private firms, and some of still state firms that are still working, but with some cuts before the war, unfortunately. So it means that Ukraine relies a lot more on Western supplies and cannot produce enough arms by themselves. So Ukraine is absolutely needed in this situation. Western arms even more than in situation if we had some industrial policy or military industrial policy. And in the end, all of these reforms and all of the direction of state are not promoting social dialogue at all. Nobody listens to the poor people. All the attention goes to give as much more privileges to the most richest people in Ukraine, in the assumption that they will strengthen the economy, but it doesn't happen. They're still thinking in templates of trickle-down economies, but it's absolutely not happening. And nobody wants to speak and hear other proposals. The slide with strike and protests. Yeah. So now with the war going and social dialogue practically absent from the government, it doesn't prevent public protests and strikes to happen. In this autumn, there was a first strike from the start of the war, and successful. Miners of coal industry were striking against corrupt leadership. And after the strike, corrupt leadership was removed and more stable one was appointed. It was a short strike, but very effective. And it shows that even in times of war, government wouldn't shut down strikes. Government wouldn't shut down protests. Still existing, and they are still going to Ukraine. People are defending their rights if they feel that they are threatened. And this strike is not only an example of such protests. For example, other very major thing, it was privatization of very important cinema archive and cultural center in Kiev. It called Dovzhenko Center of the name of famous cinematologist of Ukraine. So they tried to privatize it and just destroy all of this archive for building some like housing center for elites, and practically their decision to privatize cinema archive was met with severe protests by cultural elite, by middle class, and by students in Kiev, after which they backed down. So protests are still effective, and government listens to people who are protesting. They're still trying to pursue their neoliberal policies, but when they face a strong resistance, they always back down. The same is happening with education in Ukraine. Unfortunately, state financing of education is very low, and they try to lower it even further to promote their policy of tax cuts. So students protested against mergers of two universities into one, which will destroy a lot of professions, a lot of specialities, a lot of faculties, a lot of cathedrals. So students went on strike, and for now it have partial success. So in this slide, it says that Ukraine is still a liberal democracy, a very flawed one, very unstable one, very oligarchic one, but still a liberal democracy. It means that no matter the situation, people still can go on the protest. There's still wide discussion in social media about every issue, and that popular opinion really matters. Well, government absolutely not promoting social dialogue and doesn't want to hear what people saying. People just force government in some ways to do this, because this government very depends on its popularity, on its polls, and if they met with popular unrest, they will back down. So even in times of war, people are organizing protests, organizing communities, defending their rights, and partially successful. So there are still a lot of possibilities for such democratic process in Ukraine. And with all of these neoliberal reforms and all of this, what I call war neoliberalism, I think it's important to promote an alternative, to say that it's not the only way possible. In fact, it's absolutely unpragmatic and unrealistic way, mostly ideologically based. And with this, we are speaking about reconstruction, but in general, it's discussion a lot more wider, and discussion of the principles on which states should be built and should direct their policies. So it's not only a discussion of how international help should be directed to Ukraine, but also what Ukraine will do with it in social ways or in neoliberal ways. So, and one of the important parts of help to Ukraine and reconstruction and helping its budget to just survive in times of war, to have at least some money to finance army and some social institutes, it's absolutely necessary to campaign for cancellation of Ukraine's debt. I am one of the organizers of this campaign, and we already succeed to freeze Ukrainian debt for a few years, but it's not cancellation. It means when the war will end, Ukraine will need to pay. And it's absolutely massive numbers. These numbers, if they wouldn't be frozen, will radically limit possibility of Ukraine defending itself. For now, fortunately, with the effort of international left-wing movement and trade union movements, and especially progressive wings of Democratic Party, we accomplished at least some time for us to fight for cancellation of Ukraine debt. In the screen, the logo of Socialny Ruch with Polish parliamentary left-wing radical party Razum on the first May demonstration. And I think it's still important to continue this campaign for great social future for Ukraine, not a poor neoliberal and absolutely occupied by foreign capital and interest of the business and not the people. But that is not the only issue. Ukraine and generally world's community now promotes a reconstruction on basis far away from the social. There was a conference in Lugano that promoted a very neoliberal outlook of the reconstruction, of business-led reconstruction. We think that social reconstruction of Ukraine should be proposed and campaigned as people-centric approach. So it's not about giving money to the business and then business giving trickle down all of this money to. No, it should be an approach to help the first and foremost, the most vulnerable people who lost their houses, who moved from their homes, who have precarious working conditions, who don't have their employment guarantee, who have low wages. So in this situation, I think it's very important to campaign for reconstruction that will. To decide what to invest, what to build, and how to reconstruct Ukraine. So in this, we are approaching it with state-led development principle. We think that there wouldn't be much incentives for foreign capital to invest in absolutely destroyed Ukraine, and that it wouldn't bring stability and social justice and just good and welfare for the people if all of reconstruction will be just done by the businesses. We think that a very important role should be playing state with building infrastructure, roads, public transport, of just repairing all of the damage that was, and investing in new infrastructure, social projects, having industrial policies to develop some industries in Ukraine, to develop production, and to secure full employment. In this way, we also think that reconstruction couldn't be given only in hands of the state, but also be based on cooperation between civil society and communities. So that as the biggest part of civil society, trade unions should absolutely play a role how this money will go, where they will go, what projects will be invested, and what reconstruction priority would be sent. To promote reconstruction without trade unions is to promote reconstruction without half of the population of Ukraine. To promote reconstruction without cooperating with communities, with civil organization, with other organized group of people, is to promote reconstruction that ignores 99% of Ukrainians. So we think that reconstruction should be based on cooperation between all of these communities and the state in a very social way. And it should be inclusive, it should be democratic, means that of participation of different parts of society in deciding what to reconstruct and how. Decentral means that it wouldn't be just in hands of one region, but reconstruction should be done very decentralized, in mind with all regions, no matter how profitable will be investing in them. So it's a reconstruction on the basis of equal development of all Ukraine, especially the regions that were harmed the most. and that needs reconstruction the most. And of course, that such reconstruction should be social oriented, so it should be based on having better wages, having better part of the economy directed to support labor movement, and be centered around most part of the population, around 90% of the population, which is labor. So to give you a context of what's going on, a lot of debates in the left wing and in general was about Maidan. Was it a so-called color revolution, or was it a people's revolution? And what was going on actually in the Maidan? Unfortunately, a lot of speculation and misinformation exists on this topic. So I added a few slides to give a more context of Ukraine, of how we have come to this way. So the most important thing is that Maidan wasn't like CIA plot to destroy Ukraine or something like this, nor it was a coup. It was a democratic mass revolution with participation of millions of people against authoritarian tendencies, against geopolitical tendencies on reliance on Russia, and against old elites. I think mostly a lot of people will say that the reason for Maidan was that Yanukovych declined Euro integration. Partially it's true, but on the Maidan people were against elites. They were saying that they don't want to see oligarchs. They want Ukraine on social basis. They want more democratic Ukraine. They don't want Yanukovych's elites to rule everything, and they don't want Russification, which were going under Yanukovych rule, and they want to develop Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian language. All of this were heard in the streets of Maidan in times of protest. So people were against elite rule. People were against authoritarianism. People were against Russification. They were supporting European integration because they thought that European Union is more democratic and more social way than aligning with Russia. And in this, of course, most of the dominant role of the Maidan protest was led by liberal intelligentsia that wanted European integration and so on and so on. But other participants, as left wing, we as organization participated in Maidan. A lot of anarchist militia participated in Maidan directly, fighting against anti-Maidans and police. And of course, a lot of far right participated too, unfortunately. Because of the because of association of left wing at the time with pro-Russian policies, with conservatism, with homophobia, with traditional values, with imperialism, and so on and so on. Our main so-called left-wing party actually was on the agenda similar with such parties as AfD or Le Pen in France. Our Communist Party was extremely homophobic, extremely conservative, authoritarian, and extremely pro-Russian. So, unfortunately, they were the biggest association with the left. And when you were presented on the Maidan with some left-wing symbolics or something like this, you were associated as pro-Russian. And a lot of Stalinists actually participated in the anti-Maidan. So it all pursued dishonest view of the left. And of course, left also was unfortunately under influence of this big left-wing, so-called left-wing parties. So a lot of mistakes were made, and all of this fortunately gave the ground as militant wing of Maidan for the far-right forces. Not because of their ideology, but because the far-right were most continuously for Ukrainian independence from Russia and for development of Ukrainian language. So support of the far right in the Maidan was not because of their ideology, but because they had anti-colonial and anti-imperialist tendencies in them. In general, it was a massive protest where a lot of communities self-organized. There was independent police force made absolutely from below. It's, I would say, anarchist-based police, because it was made in the principles of direct and participative democracy, and this was police that defended people on the Maidan against government police. A lot of communities organized to help each other, to defend. You can have next slide with the pictures. To defend against the police, to help protesters to build barricades, to give them food, to organize transportation, to organize warmth, to organize water there. So it was a really revolutionary experience of self-organization. All the society helped each other in the way that I never seen before. So all the parts of society, they were bringing food there. They listened what protesters needed, and when they needed bandages or some, they were trying to find it and give them generators and so on and so on. A lot of people organized on absolutely non-paid basis to help to the people who were harmed or killed or in hard conditions, to provide necessary medical treatment. All the people participating in building barricades, on giving protesters shields to defend against police. So it was really an experience, a revolutionary experience that not happening in everyday life. So this was part of what Maidan was. It is very important to understand this also in national context. Before the Maidan in Ukraine, most of the literature in bookshelves and bookshops were in Russia. If you were speaking in Ukrainian, you were looked as some second-class citizen. So there was a lot of this national context in all of this. So people who gathered in the Maidan, they also gathered for their national rights to speak their language and to develop this language. So it was a national upheaval. People started speaking Ukrainian a lot more. People started to promote Ukrainian. People started to learn their culture. Before this, they learned mostly Russian culture. And now they started to promote their traditions, culture, language, bringing communities together to learn, to educate. So it was really experience of national upheaval. And if Maidan wouldn't happen, probably Ukrainian language would be in danger now, and Ukrainian culture, because of the pressure of Russification, of Russian propaganda and Russian finance that are poured to promote Russian way and not Ukrainian one. So Maidan gives this possibility of national liberation in some sense. And I think it's also a very important context that unfortunately usually associated with far right when speak about that, but in reality it was an agenda of all of the people who participated there, and defending of national rights and for more freedom and democracy in national question. And democratization, it's unfortunately the thing that Maidan really succeeded but couldn't develop on. As I said, a lot of self-organization, a lot of police that was forming from below, not from the above, were part of the Maidan. A lot of pressure on the old elites to give the power to the people, and a lot of pressure just democratize society in all of the way possible, oligarchic system with ruling clans, and where you have democracy and fair elections, but where you don't have like real parties to vote because they are mostly all oligarchical. So a lot of democratization drive was the reason between the Maidan, especially with Yanukovych pushing policies to bring Ukraine to more authoritarian style state. So a lot of democratic process started in the Maidan. But unfortunately, when the war started, it all ended, and it even got in some way worse. Because when Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014, all talks about creating more democratic society ended, because the first thing to talk about was how to defend our country. So Ukraine was one of the first states to actually radically demilitarize, denuclearize itself. So when in 2014 Russia attacked, all of this democratization process was just stopped, and Ukrainian society started to think how we can defend our families and our people from the occupation. In all of this, with lack of the military, lack of the industrial military complex, and this revolution only happened recently, Russian invasion really strongly reversed some democratic radical processes of Maidan in absolutely awful way. Because of Ukraine didn't have an army, there were no organized regular structure to defend country effectively. And because of this, most of the defense of the country in first months of the invasion was done by volunteer forces. And because of unorganized left wing and stigma to the left wing, and also, unfortunately, a strong pacifist tendencies in Ukrainian left wing movement at the time, left wing just ignored this and tried to find so-called peaceful solution in times of the occupation and war. And it gave a huge ground for the far right to organize. So most of the influence of far right comes not from the Maidan, but from the war, because they formed volunteer groups that are first defended Ukraine against Russian invasion. So if Russian invasion wouldn't happen, no such influence of far right in Ukraine. Now a lot of members of civil society and the left wing participate in the war directly. And with this, this monopoly that far right had with their volunteer battalions is no longer exists, because everyone fights. And because of this, all these privileges of far right as like defenders of Ukraine and anti-imperialist fighters are gone, because now everyone is anti-imperialist fighter. Because now the anarchist battalions, now the LGBTQ battalions, now the battalions of national minorities, all of the society and trade union battalions, of course, for strongly participating in war effort. Now, when all of the Ukrainian society and all of the Ukrainian people are participating in the war, influence of far right significantly was significantly lower than in 2014. So because of different people resisting Russian invasion, far right now don't have a monopoly on patriotism and on defending its country, and exclusively don't have a monopoly on the anti-imperialism. And with left-wing forces participating in the war, it helped a lot to destigmatize Ukrainian left. As Ukrainian left was before associated with pacifism and pro-Russian policies, now Ukrainian left associated with anti-imperialism and defending our country. A lot of these stereotypes about left wing as agents of Kremlin now facing the reality of left wing battalions fighting against Russian army. and a lot of this stigmatization now doesn't work, and people start a lot more trust left-wing because of our participation in all of this struggle to defend Ukraine. People now see left-wing forces as someone who represents them, someone who are with them and not against them. And it's very crucial. War really strengthened position of left-wing activists in Ukraine. A lot of stigmas were gone, and a lot of people joined, for example, our organization, or started to be interested in social democratic or socialist ideas. So the war kind of brought interest in the left to some, and partially destroyed the stigma. Of course, there's still a lot of stigma to the left in Ukraine because of the 20 years of Communist Party of Ukraine having xenophobic policies enforced and so on and so on. But now it's a lot more open ways for the left to develop. But not only for the left. The same goes for LGBTQ fighters that are now on the front line. Ukrainian society, as all post-Soviet society, are very homophobic. But now, when people are seeing that LGBTQ fighters fight the same problems as they're having a lot less homophobic relations to them. They're speaking of them with respect, and they're at the same time having the weapons in their hands, are now using this as some kind of media platform to promote more tolerance and more humanistic ideas. Ukrainian left wing, from the start of the war, actually before the start of the war, met and decided that we will participate in territorial defense groups. Anarchists formed their battalion, and now there are few anarchist groups in Ukrainian army. One from the left-wing football fans, mostly anarchists, and other from more political anarchists. They formulated their battalions and now fighting against Russian imperialism and also promoting ideas of anarchism. At the same time, there were few groups of eco-anarchist origin or vegan anarchist origin that are also formed their groups and participating in the war effort. At the same time, all of the trade unions are now also participating in the war effort, either in a humanitarian way or directly participating in the front line. Trade unions now just helping each other. If some of them were mobilized, they have strong connections with their trade unions that are still working and having direct contact, saying what they are needing in the army, and they are giving them this. With this, very strong connections were developed. A lot of cooperation between left-wing, between trade unions, and between our comrades in the army. As you can see here, left-wing also participates not only in the army, but in humanitarian help to the people who are fighting in the army and to the people who are in the frontline regions without electricity, without water, sometimes without food. So a lot of, with all of these neoliberal policies from the government, a lot of social security now comes from the volunteers that are working day and night to provide help for the people in need. It also includes a left wing. As you can see on the screenshot, the solidarity collectives and anarchist volunteer groups that are works with humanitarian aid to the people in the front lines and to the people near the front lines in the cities that are mostly harmed. And on the second screenshot, it's our meeting with our international comrades that delivered humanitarian aid to Ukraine as a leftist to show solidarity and to show strong support to our cause. They delivered aid not only for civil population, but for the military one too. And with building such connections, we are trying to contact Western left and international left for them to bring humanitarian aid or to finance humanitarian aid that then we will redistribute to the people who needed it, to the trade unions, to the fighters, to the most fragile groups of population. In this, it's very important to have international campaigns to support Ukraine, not only on the activist level, but coming here in Ukraine, show solidarity, especially left solidarity, as helps to destigmatize left and helps for the people to see that left on their side and not against them. And just bringing in the humanitarian aid, military aid, because it's absolutely needed. It's a collapsing country with military, practically self-equipped military, with most of the everything except weapons actually provided by volunteers and not by state. So a lot in the Ukraine now really depends on some help, humanitarian help, international aid, and so on and so on. But not only in activist sense, but also from the Ukraine also needs a very major help from bigger states. It counts as military help because Russian army absolutely have more equipment, more shells, more weapons, usually more advanced weapons than Ukraine. And Ukraine in this situation is absolutely need supply of the weapons from international governments. I think that if anti-tank weapons weren't provided in March and February by the US and the United Kingdom, situation could be a lot worse, or Ukraine even could, or there could be a situation where Ukraine would be just lost. So now it's very important to continue campaigning for military aid for Ukraine, for international aid for Ukraine, and actively engaging on self-organizing level to bring all the necessary attention and humanitarian aid to Ukraine. Well, yeah, we have a group of the LGBTQ fighters in army that have their separate medias, their separate battalion, not in the sense that they're all in one group, but they have their chevrons, their symbolics that all the people from the LGBTQ origin are wearing to show that army is not only a thing for heterosexual men. And in this, they're fighting for their rights and showing that you can defend your country and be LGBTQ member. So it's also a very important thing. That Ukraine now fights with one of the most conservative and racist country in the world, and Ukraine fights with LGBTQ people in their battalions, with strong representation and strong rights. The same goes for feminist groups that are participating in the army. There are a lot of women participation. Unfortunately, there are still a lot of this structural patriarchy that are women usually blocked from some position, but it's still a situation where we have women's officers, leading commanders, members of territorial defense, members of the army, participating in all of the actions in the front line. It's a symbol of LGBTQ groups that are fighting in the army. But not only LGBTQ, left-wing, civil society, trade union, activists are participating in the war effort. Also, all of the national groups that are presented in Ukrainian society are strongly participating in this war. They're understanding that their rights strictly dependent on the victory of Ukraine. If Ukraine will lose, they won't have rights for their self-determination, for their national identity, for expressing their opinion, and so on. So they are fighting for Ukraine too. In this slide, you can see people from Roma battalion. Unfortunately, Roma are very dehumanized in Ukrainian society, and there are a lot of racism towards Roma people in Ukrainian society, and structural racism. And left-wing activists are participating in campaigns to give equal rights to the Roma people, to represent them more, and to give them autonomy there, and to promote their culture and national rights. But even with the situation of structural racism in Ukrainian society towards them, they're still fighting for Ukraine, as the fight for Ukraine associates with they associate fight for Ukraine as fight for freedom. Other groups that are presented here, it's Chechen battalion that are fighting against Russian imperialism. In the same sense, their homeland was destroyed by 2 Russian invasions in absolutely horrendous campaigns against independence of Chechen Republic of Ichkeria. So now people of Chechen origin, of Chechen identity, are strongly fighting for Ukraine in the hope that when they will win, they will have their independent state and their independence returned. And third is, of course, a person from Crimean Tatar origin. There are a lot of Crimean Tatars fighting in Ukraine now to liberate Crimea and to return their freedom there, and to promote Crimean Tatar part in all of this process. They are fighting for liberation of their own land, and yeah, so it shows that all of the different parts of the Ukrainian society are gathering to defend Ukraine, to defend its freedom against imperialism. It's not like Ukraine, as some people are talking, a Nazi state. It's not possible for Nazi state to be such diverse, democratic, with protests, with different people, all fighting for freedom and democracy. So, and these 3 screenshots, it's not only national groups that are fighting. There are Jewish battalions. There are battalions of, there are even Russian battalions fighting in Ukrainian army. There are Belarus battalions that are fighting in Ukrainian army. And they are all fighting for their freedom and our freedom. With all of this said, society in general just must organize to support Ukraine, support itself in the war. So people helping each other. People form their self-governing communities. People organize humanitarian initiatives. People accept internally displaced people and refugees. People have contacts with direct contacts with their friends in the army and help them directly. People organize some hubs with energy, with free food, with free clothes, with free housing, and so on. Because of absolutely rampant neoliberal state, all social security now organized by the people. So when the war started, a lot of people were forced to migrate to Kiev, to Lviv, well, to Kiev a little bit later, because Kiev was under the siege at the time when the war started, but mostly to Lviv. And there, a lot of communities of people were built around helping refugees, around providing them with all basic materials, with all basic needs. A lot of, actually, all of the people, mostly anyone in Ukraine, now participates in some self-organization towards helping either refugees or the army or the people in general. In Kiev, for example, My Street organized patrols against possible spies, or if Russian forces will come here, and organized humanitarian help to the nearest medical station. other streets did the same. So it was popular mobilization on unseen level from all the stripes of society, except, of course, from the oligarchs who left Ukraine before the invasion. So people had this sense of self-worthness because they now did all the things. Nor the state, nor the oligarchs, but the people. They organized and they helped each other. They helped refugees. They helped just to run the country, actually. Even in Maidan times, nothing like this was experienced. It's absolutely a new level of organization, cooperation in society. And also in this slide, there another point that I want to talk in context of mass organization and mass participation, it's partisans. That when territories were occupied, a lot of people became partisans. They were hunting for Russian authorities and occupational government officials, killing them or bringing them to justice or capturing them. They sabotaged Russian military. They destroyed roads. They destroyed supply lines. They gave information to Ukrainian army of movement of Russian forces. They made such situations that Russian forces never feel safe when they are on Ukrainian territories. At any moment, they could be struck. Especially it was seen in Kherson, where a big part of liberation and of killing some of the important Russian officials were done by partisans in cooperation with Ukrainian army. So there are also this type of organization, mass organization behind the front lines, actually, that was going on. So now it's the last slide of presentation, and thank you for listening to me. I hope that it was very helpful, and I hope that you learned something new. And I think I'm now open for your questions. Thank you a lot.